Hello everyone and welcome back. Here we are. This is the next part of this tutorial series. And in the last part we left off at setting up our functions for creating our UI and our components for the setup of those. And now we're going to implement our build UI function. We just do what we did exemplary for the radial bar widget. We do it now for our new created StatsBar widget. So we create a widget, select our StatsBar widget here from the list, turn it into a variable which we call the StatsBar widget reference. We position it on the viewport just like we did before, also with an offset of 10 by 10, and add it to the viewport. Like so. Now when we hit play, we see our items, our widgets up there, but because I made a mistake and typed in 100, it was off. Yep, that looks good. And as you can see, the function in the construction script of our StatsBar widget correctly changed our icon indices the way we want to have them displayed. So much for that. Now we have the StatsBar widget, we can create the next widget, and I want the next widget to be the hotbar. That is the bar with the icons that's on the typically on the lower part of your screen that shows all the active icons that you can hold in there and have accessible by a single key press, as compared to the other items that reside in your inventory. So let's do that, and for that we need another type of widget. So we're going to the user interface and create an icon widget. Now this icon widget will be also just an image, like the radial bar. It will have the same size, 80 by 80, size it to the content. We name it also display, make it a variable. And now we have to take care of the materials for our icons. So as we have already a pick icon function available, we now need a function that creates us a border line around our icons. So we add another material function we call icon border. We open that up. And as an input, we need a texture with our border artwork. For that, we go again into Photoshop. There we open a new file. Also 128 by 128, the same as our other icons. Oops. Let's go for a really black background here. Now we do that basically the same way as we did for the rounded rectangle tool, for the rounded bar widget. We're creating some rounded rectangle shape like this. Bring it almost all the way to the edge of the screen, like so. Again, centering up all the layers. Now we give this a stroke on the inside in a nice white color. About that. And now we make a copy of that layer again. We duplicate it like so. And we add another layer and combine it with a black background with our first one, because on its own it would just have those edges around it, and when we would place it inside a different texture, it would not center it correctly. So we combine those. So now we have it completely as our border image. We go to the second one, open up the layer effects, get rid of the stroke, but we're putting in an inner glow, and this is what we're gonna use to show that the item that we selected is highlighted. So we boost up the range a little bit, the size, about like this. And bring it a bit more in like this. This is fine. Again, we combine it with another layer, but I don't want this to I don't want the highlights to overlap our border. So I just select everything that is border here with the magic wand tool. I go over to my layer here and simply, whoops, delete that out. But first I have of course to rasterize that layer, so it really turns into its shape, so we can delete pixels from there. Again, the magic wand. And we get a result that looks like this. Again, we add another layer, provide it with a black background. And now we combine it again with a black background to keep it a black and white image, because now if we just look at it like this, we see that what we deleted just became transparent. So black border here and combine. And it's pretty hard to see probably on the video, but we got some seams here left from our fuzzy selection process. And we just gonna paint over these real quick. Or like this. And if we combine that now, again, we just need to paint over some of the edges that we didn't get. Like here, here, and here. And that's almost done for our widget. Except that we need another layer. I should have made another copy of our rounded square. but it doesn't matter, we can still get what we want. We just duplicate our outline layer here, select everything that's in the outside, but it has to be contiguous, so it only selects the outer part and leaves the inner part black. Then we take a color overlay and set that to white, which gives us our opacity layer. Again, we combine it with a black background, like so. And now we have our 3 layers for our texture. Now I create a new image, 128 by 128. The other one should actually have the same image size. Yep. Don't know why it had different values in the dialog for this image. Yeah. So we go over here, take our background and put it in the red channel. We take our border and put it in the green channel. That's why I like to work this way. I can then still decide later on or rearrange them into the channels that I want. And we get this one in the blue layer. It makes the image look a little bit like this. And judging from this, I decide that I want to have a little bit bigger that glowing effect. I don't like it at the moment, but we're gonna leave it for now. Some of the 2D refinement work can be done at a later stage. We just saved that image out as a Targa file and we call it icon border masks. But here we go. We don't need that. If we create a better version of it anytime, we can create that from scratch. That's not a big problem. One thing we should check, although, is with our icon sheet elements, because we want to use that same proportions in there. I had already created that previously, so let's delete that here and create it from scratch again. I basically then I open the other one. I had done the same with the bar masks. Go into that channel, copy it here as a channel of its own. Let's already give it the give it a bit of a reddish color so we can distinguish it from all the other layers. And then just grab here the inside and delete it out. When we put that on top, we could, for example, still see if all our icons fit and what kind of border they have to that. So let's save that out. We had saved this, so we don't need Photoshop anymore. Now we just have to import it into our engine. Go for the texture and for the border masks. And again, we uncheck sRGB and make it an user interface 2D. That looks good. Now for the icon border, we need of course our texture, convert it to an object, create an input for it. So this is pretty much similar to what we created for the radial bar, because this needs to be a texture 2D. And we call it border masks. And we sample it. And we start now adding our parameters for all our color values here. I also think I'm gonna speed that up as I've shown it in the previous videos, and to get things going a bit quicker, but you can still follow along. So what I've done is basically just multiplying those two things together, and now the same way we used a scalar value as a boolean to decide for our radial bar which way it goes, clockwise or counterclockwise, or we select our channel for our icon textures. We just create another scalar value parameter to control for our highlights. So we set up scalar value, and 0 means there is no highlight, and 1 means there's gonna be a highlight. So we hook that up to an if and compare it again against 0. And the highlight will come from the blue channel. So we make another copy of our parameters. This one is called highlight tint, and we connect it to the blue channel. So that's that. Just give it a bit more of a bright color as the default values. Now we want to have this value displayed every time this equals 1. Otherwise it should display just a 0. It should just be blank for this channel output. So I take the multiply and feed it to the is bigger, and for everything that's equal or smaller it's 0. We can use the same 0 constant here, don't need to duplicate that away. And if we just hook that up, we have a 0, like no highlight. If we have a 1, we do have a highlight, and we call this parameter is highlight. Like so. Make sure it checks its default value. And now we need to lerp that together, that background with our border will be the basis for the lerp in the A input, and here we have coming out of the B input and also taking the opacity of the B input. So in total it would look like this, unhighlighted and highlighted like this, which is a bit hard to see because I chose a very bright default color for the background. Like so. Now let's just return this value back to 0, to be non-highlighting by default, and sort our values here. First I want the background tint, then I want the border tint, then I want the highlight tint, then I want the masks, and then if it is the highlight. Save that, close our material function, and now we create the same thing we did for our radial bar we do with the icons. So we're just gonna duplicate that here to save a little bit of work and call it the icon master. In that we remove the stuff that we had for the bar. We're gonna reuse our pick icon function, and we just replace it with that border. Oops. Again, border masks should care for its default value. Thank you. So, and now it's basically the same game as usual. We're setting up parameters for the different inputs here for our function. And the result, by the way, we forgot to add the opacity output. Let's make this real quick. This is rather simple, since we have the blue channel storing it. Oh, no, not the blue channel, the red channel, storing it the same way we want it. So let's put this under here, call it opacity, give it a sort order of 1, save that out again, and here we can hook that up here, and the opacity goes up here, and we have our material basically for our icons that can be modified in terms of icon index and colors the same way as this. And now I recreate all the parameters. I speed it up again because you've seen it many times already. So here we go. So now we are here complete. I sorted them into the different parameter groups for borders and for icons, just to have everything a bit tidied up, and they're all named like their counterparts in the function. And that's actually supposed to be named is highlight with a capital I. It's just my OCD kicking in here. So, and also the same of course for the parameter here. So that looks good. We can leave the default values as they are, except for the highlight. That should be off by default. Now we have our icon master material that we can assign to our icon widget. Again, we have it 80 by 80. And it's of course the material that I have to assign to it, not the texture. So here we go. Our nice little icon with transparency. The same thing we did for the function in the radial bar, we create also here the dynamic instance. again, I speed this bit up as you have seen it before. So now that we have our material instance, we can leave it at that. For the moment, we're not providing any update functions because we haven't our structures yet for our items that will be displayed there. So we don't know yet what the type of input parameters for this function will be. This comes at a later point. We will make a lot of additions to our widgets along the way. So for now, we're just happy with creating a widget that has a dynamic instance for the material that we can then reference to it. So here we have our widgets. So we create another one similarly to the hotbar. It's also a horizontal box widget container. And we call it Hotbar widget. So inside we place the horizontal box at 0, 0. And under user created, we take our StatsBar widget. Now we take the icon widget. And we need to refine this a little bit. I'm just putting it into you to show what I mean with icon widget, because we're gonna create then another widget which will be the item icon widget, and that is actually then clickable and interactable, because this one is just based off an image. And an image you cannot really click like a button. You don't have those clicked events and all those kind of things. So those icons we will use in the game for all our passive icons. So they're just not meant to be interacted with. But just for now to have it a little bit, have something on the screen. For the end of this episode, we're just popping some of them in there and just see how that looks on screen, so we get a little idea for that. 2, 4, 6 and 7 and 8. So we leave it at 8 items. A lot of people are asking in forums of games like Conan Exiles and so forth, why don't we have like 10 item slots in our hotbar? The keyboard has 10 numeric keys, so why can't we use them all? And I think the reason for this is portability between platforms. It is much easier to map those 8 slots to the 8 primary direction of a gamepad stick than having to implement a menu with 10 slots that is easily accessible from a gameplay controller. So on a PC it might work with 10 slots on your inventory, but as soon as you want to port it over to a console, then you really have then to main a second set of UI just tailored to the limitations of a gamepad controller in that regards. And so that's why many developers I guess chose that path with just sticking for 8 slots also on the PC version. So we're not going to name them because they're just for show now. In our build UI function where we created our stats bar, now we basically do the same thing again and create our hotbar. Also promote that to a variable, and the name will be hotbar widget reference. Again, we position it on the viewport. I'm just eyeballing position here. Let's say 660 by 990. Can still correct that if it should be not what we want. Let's connect that and hit play. And yeah, it looks pretty much where I want it. And if I get Shift 1, get the mouse controls, we see that we can, if I click on it, immediately the game gets the control back. We cannot really interact with those type of widgets at the moment, which is fine for our bar widget in the top, because they're not meant to be interacted with. But if we do anything more than just displaying an icon, we need to do more on the widget side, and we're gonna set that up now. Here in our where we have the icon widget, we create another widget. We call it item icon widget. So this will be our kind of our clickable widget, and it's not based on an image, it's based on a button. So we size that to content. And let's call this button the item button. Now we could apply already materials here to our image, normal styles and hovered styles and depressed styles and so on. But we don't want to update that every time to a lot of different button properties when we just change out a parameter value. And so we're gonna take one of our icon widgets and apply it as a child to the button that now appears a little bit offset, but we just need to remove the padding a little bit, and yeah, make this a bit manual, fitting right inside, and we hide the button by taking its style values and change the tint alpha down to 0 for all states. This makes the button itself basically invisible and just gives us our image. Okay. And now we hit, now we name this icon widget just icon. Again, widget is clear from context. And we close that one out. In our hotbar we have our item icon widgets in there. And now it should, yep, we can see it moving a little bit as we click, and we can really act with them. Now we don't have implemented the highlighting yet. For example, when we hover over that, let's do that real quick. We do that in our item icon widget. There we have the material reference we don't have to create here. We already have that in our icon. So here on the designer tab we choose the button and scroll down and go for the on hovered event. This will add a note here that every time we start hovering over a button, something will happen. And what will happen is we get our icon, we get our material reference, and we change a scalar parameter to 1, namely the one that says is highlight. So that's hooked up there. And let's do it also for the unhovered. We also get the material reference, and we set this scalar parameter is highlight back to 0. Let's see what that gets us. Yep, we can now nicely highlight over our items. We can click them, and that is the main part for this video. In the next part we're gonna continue setting up our widgets, creating further widgets, for example for the inventory, and we are setting up the basic UI screen and also handle the keyboard input for the UI. So until then, have a good time. Bye.